welcome to Knit Snacks. My name's Leah and I live in Southwest Ohio. I went to New York Sheep and Wool this year, also called Rhinebeck, and I'd like to tell you about how it went. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, if you go to Rhinebeck, some people make a Rhinebeck sweater that it's a big tradition, and its debut is at the festival. So I had a Rhinebeck sweater this year. I would like to share that with you now, and I took a separate video and I'll tell you a little bit about it. So here you go. This is my Oban Cardigan by Thea Coleman. I knit the sleeves a little long, and it has this great shawl collar that makes it super cozy. There's several buttons down the front that make it work almost like a jacket or a coat. I absolutely love it. And then this great pocket that's easy to keep your hands warm in. It's knit from Knit Picks Simply Wool in the color Winnie, and the buttons are from Mad for Mud buttons on Etsy. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about our adventures just to get to Rhinebeck. First off, it rained our whole drive there. It was really should have been like a 10 to 11 hour drive, and it was more like 14. So to give you an idea of how bad it was raining, this is how bad it was raining. Yeah, it was bad. So one of the other things that I noticed, I wish I had known, because it's not something that we have here in Ohio in my part of the state. An easy pass for the tolls across bridges if you're going to drive on your way to and from Rhinebeck, especially if you're going to cross the bridge between Rhinebeck and Saugerties. There is a toll. It's not a lot of savings if you decide to go ahead and just have them bill you by mail. But I wish I had known that I should have gotten an easy pass ahead of time, and then they would just deduct a lower fee directly from my checking account, or there are a couple different ways you can do it. I would encourage you to check that out if you don't already have an easy pass. And I'm sure everybody up and down the East Coast is probably thinking, really, you don't have one? We don't deal with tolls in Ohio unless you take the Beltway across the north part of the state. And most of the time you can avoid wherever it is you want to go via that, I think it's 80 across the top of the state. You don't have to take that to get to most of the places up there. So toll roads, if you live in Ohio, toll roads are something that you really don't have to think about. It was something different, and I don't mind, finding different things and experiencing new and different things. So one of the other things that my daughter and I like to do, we like to try to find unique or small business places to kind of, I always called it voting with your dollars when my kids were little. So, to encourage those small business places, just like indie dyers, you want to throw money at the indie dyers if you have it to give them. So we like to do small business places when we go out to eat in our hometown and when we go visit someplace. So she was put in charge of finding places to eat. She picked some really good places. She has some limitations on what she can eat, so we couldn't just go any place. She kind of had to look into it a little more. One of the places that we went to was Gaby's Cafe. It's a Mexican restaurant in Rhinebeck. We enjoyed that. We stopped in Saugerties on Friday morning, and she picked up a pastry at a little pastry shop called Violet's Bakery. I would strongly recommend, if you're ever in Saugerties, to stop there. They appeared to have a very small selection, but it was amazing. So if you can. Another place that we went for breakfast was the Historic Village Diner in Red Hook, New York. Oh, and show notes. I have show notes here, so that's why I keep looking down. We ate twice at a place called Cider Bros Roadhouse, which we were a little worried about, but actually the food was very good, and they had a huge selection of cider, which we're big fans of. The hard cider. As my British friend said when she got a cup of apple juice one time when she asked for a cider. She says, real cider, not the apple juice that you guys talk about in the fall. So real cider, if you will. They had a large selection of hard cider. We had a couple different ones, and they were very good as well. That's in Red Hook. And then we also went one night with a large group to Red Hook Diner in Red Hook. And they had a huge menu with a huge variety of food. Most of these places, my daughter and I split a meal because it was more than enough. So I would encourage you to look at some of the small places. Most of what we saw were small places, locally owned places in the Red Hook, Rhinebeck, Saugerties. Sunday we went to Hyde Park. A lot of those places had locally owned businesses to stop at. So when we made our reservations, I had asked a couple people, hey, where are you staying? I had contacted Chevell's because we had, with the Chevell podcast, we had met at Yellow Springs last year, and I hung out with them a little bit at the campground where they were staying. I said, hey, where are you guys staying? Because I was trying to get an idea of what places were around, and she had suggested a place called Jenny's Manor Inn Lodge. That's where they were staying, and I thought, well, okay. I mean, she said she was particular about a few things, and this seemed to check the boxes for her. So that's where we stayed. It came with breakfast on Saturday and Sunday. It was a nice place. It was very clean. I would recommend it. It seems like the kind of place maybe back in maybe the 50s and 60s when people would vacation up in that part of the state from New York City or other places. Really, that was probably a place where a family would vacation. It was like staying at your grandmother's if your grandmother ran a hotel or a motel or a lodge inn kind of place. It was, I'll include links for all of these places down below. It was very quaint. It was an enjoyable stay. The people that run it are amazing. So another recommendation. Staying with us were not with us, but in the same facility. Chevis and Dan from the Chevell Stuff Room, John and Aquilla from a Lefty Nerd podcast, and then Johnny Bodies, and then Teresa from Pretty Twisted Yarns, and also Tammy from Cinematic Skeins, and then I think Jessica from Biskit Rising was staying there maybe one night. Anyway, we did hang out for a bit. Chevis and Dan had one of the larger rooms, so we kind of hung out in their room for a while. It was nice to get to meet Teresa for the first time in person. She's a sweetheart. If you're not familiar with Pretty Twisted Yarns, I would check them out. Trying to think of what else. I will say, as far as what I'm going to go over in this podcast, I'm not going to push a lot about what I bought. Just because I've always said I'm really not an acquisitions kind of person. It's a feeling that I have about not pushing that. So if you're here for acquisitions, I'm not going to have them. But I am going to talk about the people because the people were amazing. So I mentioned Johnny Bodies, and they were also one of the couples. John and Aquilla were one of the couples that I hung out with at the campground in Yellow Springs. And after Yellow Springs, he dyes yarn. He usually will video the whole dyeing process, which I find incredibly fascinating. I've never dyed yarn. I'm kind of scared to dye yarn, but I do find it fascinating to watch him do that. Anyway, so after Yellow Springs, he dyed a unique colorway, just kind of, I guess, I don't want to say in memory of that trip, but inspired by that trip. That's a better way to put it. Inspired by that trip. And this is the color that he dyed. It's called Yellow Springs. And looking at this, this is Yellow Springs. I don't expect you guys to have ever been to Yellow Springs, but if you ever make it to Yellow Springs and a wool gathering at Young's, this straight up screams Yellow Springs to me. So I was, and still am, incredibly touched to have received this from him. I am incredibly thankful. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with this, and I have decided, I think I'm going to knit a Stephen West pattern. It's called Trying Not to Cry. Trying Not to Cry, and it's not working. Anyway, Crystal Fragments Shawl. So I did some stash diving this afternoon, and I found this. I had this. So I also found, we're going to see how well I can balance things. This is going to be entertaining, you guys. So I found this. I'm a huge fan of pink. So this one, and then this one. Whew. Oh, yep, see? Can't balance anything. I have never knit a Stephen West pattern, by the way. And then, hold on just a minute. Here we go. We're going to do it. I have these also. So I think these paired together with this one being, so the Crystal Fragments has a great big geometric crystal diamond-y kind. It's not a diamond, it's a hexagon? Anyway, you'll see in the picture. There's one big piece across the back of it, and that's what I'm going to do this with. The others are just going to be accents on the sides. I think that's going to look okay. We'll see. So I'm excited for that. That's now on my list of things to knit and I'm so behind. My goodness, I need to get one of my sweaters off the needles. I really need to do that. So anyway, that's the one purchase that I will show you from Rhinebeck, and that wasn't, or one yarn, that wasn't even, that's the one yarn I will show you from Rhinebeck, and that wasn't even a purchase. So Friday, so my daughter and I walked around Socrates. Like I said, we stopped at the bakery, stopped at a couple other little shops. It's a cute little town. It was really enjoyable to walk around. And then we had Cake Palooza tickets for 12 to 2. So we went over to Cake Palooza in time to make it over there, and stood in line a little bit. And as we were standing in line, I looked over, and there's a gentleman here in my part of, he actually lives in the town I grew up in. It's just the next town south of us. And he was walking up to stand in line. So I yelled at him and said, hey, and told him that I could not believe that I had to go all the way to New York to meet somebody that lives 15 minutes from me, maybe. But it was good to chat with him. It's Michael Green is his name. I've test knit one of his patterns. He's an incredibly talented designer, and he's talented in a lot of ways. I will include his Instagram account below so that you can check his stuff out. He's just the sweetest guy. Oh my gosh, the sweetest guy. I think I got 5 hugs from him. So sweet. Anyway, so the next person, so we went into Cake Palooza and looked around and, did the shopping that we were going to do. But the one person that I really wanted to see there was Shala from Black Purl Magic. She was selling her bags. Shala was actually my FiberShare partner in the last session of FiberShare. And if you're not sure what FiberShare was, I'll just tell you a real quick little bit about it. You put a survey in, and then they match you up with somebody, and there's one person that you're getting yarn from and somebody you're sending yarn to. And I believe the rule is that you have to send them 200 grams of yarn. Don't quote me on this. I didn't make up the rules. I don't remember. They haven't had another FiberShare since the first quarter of 2020, and that one got delayed. But it was a really unique thing for you to connect with people, and I've done it twice. So I have, 4 fiber share partners, one person I was receiving and one person I sent to. Shayla's actually the person that I sent to in this last round. So it was so nice to actually meet her in person, and she's just as sweet as can be, and I absolutely adored meeting her. I was really thankful to have that opportunity. Let me think here. So we finished at Cakepalooza, and then we were still really tired from the drive, so we went back to our room, took a nap because it's vacation, why not? And then after that, we decided last minute to go to the Flox.ie skating party. So we showed up, I think we picked dinner up because you could take food in, picked dinner up, went to the Flox.ie skating party, and did what I did when I was in middle school and high school, and hung out and didn't skate, and that's okay, and chatted and talked with people. And I was good with I would say quiet evening in. It wasn't quite quiet, but it was definitely enjoyable. It was lots of talking and hanging out and just having a great time. So Friday night we went back to the room, and we all just wanted to get in bed. And so we got in bed and got up early Saturday morning, had breakfast at the inn, like I mentioned, and it was very good. And then headed over to the Dutchess County Fairgrounds for the big event, which was New York Sheep and Wool. So if you've never been to New York Sheep and Wool, it's big. Our local fiber festival, which is a wool gathering, is pretty decent size. It's not, I've certainly been to smaller, but wool gathering always has kind of the same vendors. So this was nice to see new vendors that I wouldn't normally see at wool gathering, although some of the people at New York Sheep and Wool were people local to me or not far from me, or people that I actually see at the wool gathering. So to see new people though, like Miss Bab's Yarn, or just new vendors. I was also looking forward to meeting some of the, I'll say, knitting influencers that we have as knitters in this community. So there were a couple people that I was on the lookout for. I got to chat with and say hi to just about everybody. The first people that we ran into were the Knitters League girls, and I was super happy to chat with them. I enjoy their podcast. I didn't get a picture with them. And then I'm going to put some pictures and videos at the end of this because I'm going to get off track, and I'm going to try not to. My daughter is also taking a photography class in college. So we had a number of things. She said, oh, I want to stop here and get pictures, or this. So we went and did a couple things like that. So that was very, very fun to do, because one of them was we went to a park on the Hudson River, and she went and took the pictures that she needed, and I sat and knitted on a park bench, and I was okay with that. So some of the people that I was able to get pictures with and or meet, I got to meet and take a picture with Adella from Lola Bean Yarns. I'm actually knitting a sea glass sweater right now, and so I got a picture with my swatch with her because I was not going to take the whole sweater to the fairgrounds. I did have it with me on the trip to knit, but I didn't want to drag it with me because it's halfway done. It's to the point where it's too big to take any place. So that was super nice to meet her. My sea glass sweater, part of it is Miss Babs, and then half of the contrasting colors are Lola Bean Yarns, and that's why I wanted the picture with her. I also got to meet Gigi, or Gay Glass Pie, from GGMadeIt. What you see in the videos is who she is in person. Just the sweetest lady. I got to meet Maddie and Kristen from We Share Needles. Of course, Chevis had her picture with the sheep tapestry, and then got to hang out with Aquilla and John just a little bit on the hill. This was all up on the hill. I also got to see Andrea from the CATT lady up on the hill, which was super nice because I haven't seen her since the wool gathering. I got to see Jessica again from Biskit Rising, and Tammy a little bit again from Cinematic Skeins. More like a, hey, how you doing? And, you know, keep going kind of thing. So Safiyyyah, the drunk knitter, she was actually signing books in one of the buildings. So I stopped by real quick and said hi to her and appreciated, you know, told her how much I appreciated the new book that she has out, which is really cool. And then one of the other things I had, one of the other people that I really wanted to see was Lindsey from Larkspur Knits. And I have knit several of her patterns. I have test knit for her a couple times, and I really enjoy her patterns. There's something just really special about the way they're constructed and the aesthetic, and a lot of the times they're simple, but sometimes they're not, or they're a little simple, but there's a bit of a twist that makes them more complex. Anyway, Lindsey just released a new book called Salt and Timber, and one of the things I was doing was actually shopping for yarn for one of the hats in there. So I really wanted to chat with her, and then I had on a shawl. Hold on just a minute and I'll get that to show you. So one of the things that I wanted to do was talk to Lindsey, because I had this with me, and I was super, super excited to show her this. And it was funny because we were standing on the hill and she had actually gone, I knew that I was in the time frame where she wasn't at the book signing, because she was also doing the book signing like across from Safiyyyah from the Drunk Knitter. I was trying to kind of time my time on the hill so that I could go back when she was back at the table for the book signing. I look up and she's walking across the hill, and then she notices it had gotten warm enough. I took my sweater off because it was too warm for my sweater, but it was just chilly enough in the shade. So I had taken this with me, and I had this over my shoulders, and she instantly recognized it. And she's like, oh, and I said, I want to chat with you, but you're carrying your lunch. Go eat and I'll find you later. But I will find you. She's like, okay, thanks. So she goes, sits down, eats her lunch and stuff. And then, you know, I knew that she was supposed to be back at her table at a certain time. I gave her, you know, a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And I was like, oh, we went back to the table. She wasn't there. And I thought, well, we'll go back to the hill. I'll see if she's back over there, because it wasn't that far between the two. So we go back over on the hill, and sure enough, she was still sitting there, you know, trying to catch those last few minutes with friends before she had to go back for a book signing. So I was chatting with her. I asked her, I said, you know, is now good? Because I really am very conscientious about not infringing on somebody's time with their friends, and I'll say at the festival. And I know part of it is connecting with people. I also know that sometimes that can be a chore. So I try to find that happy balance, you know, to kind of allow people to enjoy their time and disconnect if they need to. So I asked her, I said, you know, is now good? She's like, oh yeah, absolutely. So we chatted a little bit about my shawl. I had some socks with me that I was almost done with. I showed her those because I just absolutely adore them. I was talking to her about her book. I'm trying to think of what else it was. Told her how much I appreciated her patterns, general stuff, and about the fact, like, she also lives in Ohio. Just, I'll say general chattiness about what you would normally chat with somebody about, you know, I like this project you did kind of thing. So we're standing there, and her friend comes running up, and she says, oh my goodness, did you know that you have a hole in your shawl? And I said, no. And I'm going to put a picture in here because I repaired it this morning, and you can kind of see where I repaired it right here. It's not perfect, but it's not a hole. Anyway, she says, yeah, she says, you have a hole. And so they helped me, they picked up the stitches for me on stitch markers so that it didn't come undone. And then I finally got around to repairing it today. And I'm going to try to put a video up about how I repaired it. But I have to tell you, I don't know what the heck happened to this thing, but there were three rows. Like the yarn had just been cut or ripped, or I don't know. The hole was about, I don't know, but about the size of a quarter maybe. It was pretty big size, but I was absolutely stunned when I realized that it was 3 rows of yarn that had been like just, and I mean, not just a single rip, like a cut or what, but there were, I pulled pieces out. It was almost like something grabbed it, or I don't know. It was weird. But it's fixed. It looks, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have a hole in it. And if anybody ever asks me what happened, I've got a great story to go with it, because I mean, how many times do you meet a designer wearing the thing that they designed and they get to tell you, oh, and by the way, there's a hole you need to fix. I was a little stunned. I was horrified because this is one of my favorites, but I am pretty happy with how it repaired. I'm pretty happy with it. It's almost not noticeable. And I think if you were wearing it, probably wouldn't be noticeable. So, anyway, Sunday we went to Hyde Park. Hyde Park is where Franklin Delano Roosevelt lived. And then after his death, Eleanor lived like not far from there, and I wish I could remember what the name of her house is. Anyway, she has a house that she lived in there. So we decided to go ahead and take a tour of FDR's house, and then he opened the first presidential library on the property, and they put a museum in there now about his life. We took a tour there, and it was very interesting to see, first of all, how, I'll say, very wealthy people lived back then. I've seen houses like that in our area before. Like the area that I live in, it's amazing. One of the houses that we have in our area is the Wright brothers' home. So it's interesting to, like, I've toured that house before, and the FDR house to me is very reminiscent of the era of the Wright brothers' house. The Wright brothers' house is called Hawthorn Hill. The difference is that FDR was in a wheelchair, and they really tried to keep it from people because they kept it from people. I'm not going to speculate as to why. I'm not sure if it had to do with not wanting the public to know that he was in a wheelchair so that he didn't look frail or unable to hold the office, or if it was he didn't want world leaders to know that he was in a wheelchair because they were afraid that he wouldn't look like he was worthy of the power that he wielded as the president at the time. I'm not sure. Anyway, so we did do the tour there, and it was very interesting. Then they also had the museum next door, which again was very interesting. It was very interesting to see the different things that were happening. The way the museum's laid out, they have things that are happening in the world, and then also kind of with, like, they'll have a headline from the world with things that were going on in, say, FDR's life. So that was interesting to see that way. Eleanor Roosevelt was very much an advocate for women and minorities and people that were kind of being left behind. It was amazing to see they had a replica or copies of part of her FBI file, and that was amazing to me, just how much paper they kept on her, because they thought that, I don't know why, they were suspicious of her, I'll say that. They did make it very clear that they were suspicious of her. And then in the library, there's also all of the writings and things like that from Franklin, and then also from Eleanor, and then their artwork is hung on, like, in a room, so if somebody needed to go look at it, they could easily look at it. He had a fascination with the ocean and with sailing, so he has a bunch of model airplanes, listen to me, model ships in another room. And then there's another room that has a whole bunch of just artifacts, like one section just of, like a small section, but of busts of different people. Trying to think of what else we saw that was, it was really interesting. Most interesting because, generally speaking, when you go to a presidential library, from what they had posted there, because this is the only presidential library that I have been to, but they were saying that one thing that made this presidential library unique was the fact that everything, all of the items within the presidential library were behind glass for you to be able to see most of them. Obviously the documents, you couldn't look at all of the documents. They were all in storage boxes, but you could see the massive amount of them. So it was very interesting from that perspective to be able to see the kinds of things that go into a presidential library, because I didn't realize all of the different things that they put into a presidential library. I didn't know. So that was very interesting. And then Monday we drove home, and that was a relatively uneventful drive, thankfully. And that's my New York Sheep of Wool roundup. It was a whirlwind of a weekend. It was a little crazy. It was a great time. It was great to hang out with friends again. It was a lot. I was really thankful that I went, though. It's a once in a lifetime experience if you ever have the opportunity. If you don't, I would keep in mind that it's just like your local, if you have a local yarn festival, and maybe you can meet up with some of your yarny and woolly friends at your local yarn festival if you're not able to make it to New York Sheep and Wool. But anyway, yeah, so I'm going to try to get a video posted about how I repaired my shawl, and hopefully you guys enjoy that. It's going to be a long one because it was a long process, but I thank you for spending your time with me today, and I hope you guys have a great time.